Hello and welcome back to Living the Small Business Life. Today on the podcast we're going to be talking about work-life balance as a small business owner. I'm Laura, Managing Director of Move Digital, and I'm here with Ben and Ben. So to get us started today, guys, do you want to let me know, well, let's dive straight into it. Work-life balance, what have you guys done today, this morning, before we started, that helps with your work-life balance?
Work-life balance, what's that? It's something I personally struggle with. And there's certain things that I do at the moment that I really just prioritise my sleep, make sure I eat well. Sunday has become a bit of a day of a rest in our household. There's no kids clubs. We generally just go for a nice long walk or something with the dog, whereas before we were football Saturday afternoon, football Sunday afternoon, trying to squeeze running in there and stuff like that. So they're just like little things. I actually quite like a cold shower as well. That's something I started probably about 6 months ago. I know everyone got into the cold plunging, didn't they? But yeah, I sort of have my shower in the morning, and the last minute I whack it down to freezing cold, and I actually find that really wakes me up in the mornings, quite invigorating. So they're just a few little things that I do. Don't know about you, Ben.
I struggled again with work-life balance, switching off, being able to leave the office, and I think I mentioned it in the first episode, where you'll be sat watching the TV with your family or doing something with your family, and you find someone speaking to you, and then you sort of, sorry, what did you say? Because you're not in the moment. And I struggle with that quite a lot. However, one of my friends who runs a small business as well, was in the gym doing a lot of weightlifting and various things. He's been doing it for a long time. And I thought I needed to get fitter, because I was extremely overweight at one point, which I'm not exactly slim at the moment, but I thought I've got to do something, because I found myself being very tired. I was driving up the motorways from appointments, and I found myself sort of nodding off, thinking, oh my God, I've got to pull over, because I was really tired. So yeah, I started the gym and weightlifting, and I found that for me, just taking that hour out 3 times a week during the week, completely zoning out, phones off, has been a massive change for me. Huge change. I all those worries that I normally have that are not necessarily taken away by being in a home environment, being in a gym, it's like I'm walking into a room, shutting the door on everything, and just like I'm free. And that has really helped me out. And I don't know whether that's just a personal thing, because I've really enjoyed doing it, or, I've seen, personally, I've felt that I've seen rewards from doing it. I'm not sure. Maybe time will tell, but it just feels to me that you've got to have things away from the rat run. It's, kids are getting up. Saying kids, but they're 16 and 19. One's going off to work. The dog's up. You've got dog walks to do. Breakfast is to get ready. Then it's out the door, straight into the office. The phones start ringing. You've got emails throughout the day. It's just a constant blend. And then for me, it's finish work. I have to finish work early 3 times a week. And I say early because I get in early, because I've got a child who's at football academies, and I have to drive him to the football academy. Then I'm waiting around. I've got my laptop open while I'm watching them and doing work. So for me, it was balancing that work and home life has become very, very difficult, especially as they've got older, I would find, because they're involved in a lot more things. The eldest one is not so difficult anymore, because he can drive himself now, so I'm not a taxi. But then at the weekends, we've got football on a Saturday, football on a Sunday. It's a constant evolution every single week. So I've personally finding the gym that's something outside of what I was doing normally has really helped me focus my attentions on my home life with my family, and it has also helped me focus on the work, because I just found that everything was just blurring into one. It was going from one stressful situation to another, and I was never getting any respite. So that has really helped me out, and that could be anything for anyone. I know you do a lot of running.
You do running as well, don't you?
Yeah, I also, so I suppose if we were going to kind of look at it as like, what have I done today? So I did go for a run this morning, and I haven't been able to run for about 18 months, and I'm back at it, and it is just as much of a, like, it is definitely my happy place, and it has been pretty much all my adult life. But I would say the other thing that, I suppose, shortcut tip, but the other thing that I do is that I have all the notifications switched off on my phone, except for phone calls and text messages. So if you know, anything else that goes on, I've got email on my phone. Oh, so there's two things in that. Firstly, I've got everything switched off. So unless you call me or text me, you know, I'm not getting notifications about social media. I'm not getting the notifications about, you know, you've parked your car or whatever it is. That's been life-changing. And I have my work email on my phone, but I will switch it off. It's usually off as standard. And if I need it, I will switch it on, download my emails, have a look, and then I'll switch it back off again as well. So I think the reason that I would say those are my kind of top tips is, I think for me, one of the things around work-life balance is that I want to be able to concentrate on the thing that's in front of me. And like you say, Ben, if that's being at home and, you know, I'm with my family, that's the thing I want to be concentrating on at that point. And I'm happy to make time, you know, for work as it needs to be made time for. But when I'm doing that, I want to be concentrating on work. You mentioned multitasking in the last episode. You know, I've actually become a lot worse at multitasking, and I have to manage that quite closely. So I think for me, it's like exactly what you guys have just described: focus and making sure when I'm focusing on something, that's the thing I can focus on.
I think it's being present, isn't it? In what you're doing. And when you're trying to juggle so many things and your head's all over the place and you're constantly thinking about yesterday or tomorrow, you're not thinking about what you're doing right now. And actually, I think what you said about the gym, I shut the door, all you're focusing on is lifting those weights in the gym. When you went for your run this morning, all you're thinking about is left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. You know, that's all it is, and it's being really present in that moment. And I think we're so busy in our lives, and especially as business owners and, you know, having families, that you just don't get that time, like you said. I mean, I literally had to work from home the other day because I had a phone call home about my daughter and I had to go into school for a meeting. You know, and then it was straight out of that meeting in school, and then it was straight to football training, and then, you know, straight from football training, and Laura wasn't feeling very well, my wife, and she said, I haven't walked the dog, and it's like, okay, so I'll go and walk the dog then, and then it's like, we need some, you know, and it's just constant like that all the time. And I think you've got to have that downtime or that thing that you need to do just to go, I think you said, go to your happy place, you know, just to take yourself away and do something that you enjoy and want to participate in, because work can be really, really hard. And I find that if I've had a particularly busy day at work, I can take that home with me. So I might, you know, good mood, bad mood, whatever it might be, but I'll be sat around the dinner table and I'll be wanting to look at my phone, you know, and I'll have an email, or I'll be thinking about something that's happened that day, and the kids are talking to me about what they've done at school, or daddy this or daddy that. And like, you know, you said, it sort of goes in one ear and out the other almost. So, you know, being present is really key, isn't it? You know?
And I think it's also, you know, it's being present, but I think it's also, I think often when you run a small business and you kind of feel like everything is on you, you know, if you were employed, then potentially there's levels above you, there's somebody else who's, you know, thinking strategically about the business, or it can feel like it's all on you. And I think a mistake that lots of people make when they think about work-life balance is, I don't have time for that, and what is going to be the benefit of it? But whereas for me, I think the benefit of it, I always think as, I do my best work when I'm the best version of myself, and the best version of myself goes running, looks after themselves, gets to do things that they enjoy. You know, an aspect of my work is very creative. If I want to have creative ideas, I need the headspace to have creative ideas. And I think to think strategically in any way, you need to have the headspace to be able to do that. And when you're just constantly in this, like, got to get it done, you're just not creating that space. It's not only just not healthy for you as a person, but it's not healthy for your business either.
No, I'd agree. I think one of the things that's helped me over the years, and I didn't do it early on, is that I took my family for granted in the early years of running a business. It was like the family were just there, and that was it. You know, you grew up, you got married, you had children, you worked, and everything was, you know, yes, you were going out to work to earn money to facilitate for your family. But what I've realised, especially over the last sort of 10 years is that your family are your support organisation. They are your backup. They are your rock. They are your brick, and I've really, really bought into the family aspect, because I took them for granted in my early years.
Do you think you put on Lindsay quite a lot in the early days if you were busy
massively
at work?
so.
Yeah. She's stuck at home with the kids while you're out working.
Yeah. And all the excuses come out of the sun. I'm working, work's really important. Reality of it is that work is important and running your business is important, but things can wait. If you decide to leave the office at 5:30, and you're going home, you should leave the office at 5:30 and the door should be shut and you should focus on your family. And I found massive support in my family and stupid things like, the other day I'd had quite a stressful day, got home from work and my youngest son come in and said, "How's your day at work, Dad?" And I was like, "I don't really want to talk about it if I'm being brutally honest." And he went, "Oh, just that, I've got an 8 in business studies for his mocks on GCSE. My life changed in that split second. Everything that had happened in that day sort of went out the window, and it was focusing on, like you said, in that moment with my son and my family, enjoying the fact that he'd done really well in his GCSE mocks. So, yeah, I would say that the biggest piece of advice for me for work-life balance is make sure whatever your outside life looks like, whether it's a family or a partner, whatever it may be, is that you give that much, the same attention that you give in work, that you give to your family unit or your friendship groups, whatever it may be, because I found a huge amount of support from that element, and obviously the gym as well. But I didn't get into the gym it was only through a friendship group that I've started in the gym, and these things really help you out. It really does. But yeah, don't take things for granted, because I think we both know of a particular customer that has had a really successful business. They've done really well, they're driving nice cars, they're earning loads of money. We actually had a conversation with this individual, we won't mention who it is, literally 2 weeks ago. Yeah. And we said, "Oh, I bet you're ever so proud of what you've achieved." And he went, "Yeah, but it's cost me my family, it's cost me my wife, it's cost me a marriage, it's cost me my home. Yes, I've got all these materialistic things, but I've lost a hell of a lot more than I've gained financially." So, running a small business is not necessarily about financial reward for me.
Yeah.
I think with kids as well, all they want is your time.
Yeah.
And if you're shutting them down because you've got an email to get out, or you've got to jump on or whatever it might be, you've really got to. My kids aren't going to be young forever, no. And they're growing up so fast. My youngest is about to start secondary school in September, and I know everything changes when you go to secondary school. From the experience of my daughter going to secondary school, they start going out more, they're with their friends more, so I just know that with my son, I've got sort of 6-7 months before he enters high school, and I really want to make the most of that time, because he's not going to want to be around me forever, and he really does at the moment. My daughter's now doing her own thing, or starting to, so that next 6-7 months with him, I know, is actually super important. Crucial.
Yeah, it's crucial.
Yeah. So.
And I think it's also, even if you're doing that, so I mean, we've all started off this episode by talking pretty positively about our work-life balance. I think we could all agree that we all work hard at the businesses that we run, but we also make time for ourselves and our families. But I think we've all been through periods where that's not been the case. And for me, one of the things that I reflect on is the fact that I went through a period, not in my current role, where I was incredibly stressed and I would say burnt out. And I was vividly remember making time for my family, as in, it's the weekend, we are going to go and do this fun thing, and doing the fun thing with the family. But I was so burnt out that I couldn't enjoy it. And I remember going to things thinking, but I did all the right things. I've made the quality time. I've brought everybody here. Why am I not enjoying this? And actually, when you take it to that extreme and you're, working so hard that you can't see anything else, you are going to lose all the things that you think that you're doing it for as well. I think, to come back to the example you just gave of your customer.
Do you know, perversely, looking back at the times that I had, 'd, in business where I've not necessarily taken the, I don't know, the, 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 work and life balance out of the equation, or put it in a different pendulum, or swung the other way, is that I was always under the impression that if you wanted to build a successful team or a successful business, you had to live and breathe your staff.
Yeah.
So, typical things would be you'd go to work Monday to Friday, you'd be working long hours, your family would suffer. It got to a Friday and it was like, right, who's going to the pub? What time are we going to the pub? And, I was always under the impression that building a team or building a successful team meant that you had to live and breathe those individuals. And I've realised over the last sort of 10 years that that's not the case. You don't have to do that to build a successful business and a successful team. You don't have to be with these people outside of work. You go to work with people, and yes, you enjoy their company whilst you're at work, hopefully. But I've also worked with people that are very good at what they do, but I don't necessarily like them, and I don't want to associate with them outside of work. So I've pulled it back, and the family for me, an outside interest I've got. I'm a coach for a local football team. I've coached them since under sevens. That in itself can be quite a stressful experience, having to deal with parents, Johnny didn't get enough game time this weekend, and it's, all these things are relentless. And I think that you just have to boil it back down to some key fundamentals that make you feel good about yourself, and where you can shut away your business for a period of time, because you can drive yourself insane. And my two are my family, first, and then the gym, I found, is a really, really helpful for me.
Yeah.
I think the other thing as well, like you were saying about notifications, Laura, I think with the way that technology is now, and you can always be available, you can always be working, whereas I remember when I first started working, the office closed at 5 and that was it. You didn't have a laptop, you had a PC in the office that you worked from, and
you didn't have telephones.
Yeah, you didn't have a mobile phone.
You.
You didn't have an iPhone, you didn't have an Android phone, and even if I'm not on this, I've got my iPhone in my pocket, and it's constant notifications all the time, out of hours calls, and I think, like you said, it can wait till tomorrow. It really can. And the other side of that is that actually having this technology available to us also can be a positive for work-life balance, because it allows us to work remotely. It allows us to work from home. And I think a lot of people don't have the tools in place to be able to separate the two. So I think it's just being able to distinguish, right, now is time to be working or concentrating on family. Now is the time that I'm doing this, and work has finished. But I think a lot of people have just made themselves available all the time. And I think a lot of people have got to make some changes there, and I know that I've had to work really hard to do that, because I'm not available all the time, and I've had to actually drop things like coaching my daughter's football team, which I did for 3 years, and I found it relentless. There's constant organisation of fixtures and referees and painting white lines and doing this, and I actually had to make a decision where I said, right, Thursday night I'm football coaching, but I've got to plan the session, I've got to do this, Saturday's a football match, with kit's got to be washed, and I was getting burnt out, and I actually had to say, right, what can I actually drop at the moment, because this is actually, I'm not enjoying this anymore, and it's adding to my stress. So I actually took a stand back from that, and it was quite a big decision for me, because I did enjoy doing it, and my daughter. I
was going to say, did you stop it because you felt you were being burnt out, because you had stresses at work that were impacting on that decision that you've made for your life balance outside of work? Because for me, running a football team, which I'm sure a lot of business owners participate in many different teams, hockey, netball, basketball, that for me, even though that can be stressful at times, the reality of it is that I don't coach a football team because I want to coach lots of children, and I do it for my son primarily. Yes, it is nice to see the other kids progress, and they've come from tots to now they're going into under 18s next year, and I've seen these kids grow and develop at football, and it's been quite an experience to be part of their development. But the reality of it is that I've done this for my son. I've done this for my son, and I don't think and there were times where I thought I'm going to give this up, especially during the COVID. You're thinking, I've got my weekends back. There's no football matches. Look what you can do on a Saturday. You can do some DIY. You can do this. You can do that. And I thought, no, I think sports for your children is quite important. And I knew that if I was to drop out of coaching at that point, it may impact on him potentially. And I didn't want to run that risk. So my point to you is do you think you dropping out of it has impacted on your daughter? And was that a consequence of what happened at work?
I would say that it was additional stress on top of work stress. So I was finding, it's my turn to do take the training session this week, and I haven't really sat down and thought about it, and we've got to be there in an hour. So I end up fudging a session plan together quickly. So I didn't feel like I was giving it my best, and I was finding like I was trying to cram it in.
Yeah.
I very much like you did it because I wanted to support my daughter, but what actually that meant is I never got to see my son play football, because Saturday morning football matches. So my wife was going to watch my son play. I was obviously taking my daughter's team every week. And it was more important for me to not have that additional stress, because I found I wasn't enjoying it anymore, and all the rushing around that came with that. And actually now I can go and watch my son play one week, and I'm still there for my daughter to go and watch her play every week, every other week now. And my wife gets to see my daughter play now as well. So actually it's had a benefit for us. The other side of that is my son is now doing really well at athletics, where he's now competing a year above his age group at regional level for Bucks County. So who got suckered in to help with coaching the athletics team? So I've ended up filling that with something else.
Out of one frying pan into another one.
But actually, I've been very boundaried around that, because I don't want to get sucked into the same thing. So I turn up on a Monday night, I help out, I measure the long jumps, I rake the sandpit, I put a few cones out, and I go away and I don't have to think about it for another week. Whereas football was very different.
Yeah.
It's not just turning up on a Thursday night and a Saturday morning. There's a lot of additional hours you have to put in. So actually it's been really nice. And now I've spent 3 years coaching my daughter's football, and now I'm really involved with my son's athletics. So I've been able to flip between the two, which has been really nice as well.
I think what's interesting in the discussion that the two of you have just had, is what essentially you're expressing, which I think makes this an incredibly difficult subject, is that work-life balance is such a personal thing. Is that actually some people's outside interests are things that I would never ever want to do, and
you don't want to coach a football team?
Well, I don't think I want to coach a football team. I do go swimming, but I'm definitely not getting in any cold water. So and I think that's one of the things that can be really difficult about work-life balance, is because, again, like, we've talked about quite a few times, the reason we want to do this podcast is because we want to talk about the reality of small business, and we couldn't really hear anyone else sort of doing that. I think the other thing is, sometimes when there's a problem with work-life balance, you want to do things differently. But, what's the advice out there is geared towards, someone in this situation, someone in that situation, and actually things that move the needle for you personally are so personal often.
Yeah, 100%.
That, it's really difficult. And then you can almost end up in a cycle of like, oh, I tried this and I was doing this, or I planned it this way, or I put these boundaries in, and yet that's not made a difference. What have I done wrong? Whereas actually, I think for me now, over, maybe I would say the last 4 years, I've got to a place now where what I know about, how I want to do work-life balance, how I want to set my boundaries, I know it's really personal to me now. Like, I will take, if something doesn't feel right, I will take some time to be like, I'm just going to sit with this, because I'll get there. I know what the answer is, but I just need some space to figure it out. Rather than before, I might have been like, well, I need to plan my week on a Sunday, and then I need to do this, this, and this, and then I need to execute the plan, and then everything will be fine. Whereas now I'm like, some days I am, we talked about multitasking or lack of multitasking. Often I get to a stage where I'm like, there are so many things that I need to do, and they are all completely random, and I'm literally just going to spend a morning doing all of them. I'm literally going to jump from this to this to this to this, because I know by lunchtime I'm going to be like, oh, amazing. that feels really good that I've done that. But other weeks I'm like, no, you have to stick to that plan or else you're going to feel rubbish.
But it can become a never-ending to-do list as well, can't
Absolutely.
it? Which is where the burnout comes from and the draining comes from. It's like just tick, 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 add, tick, tick, tick. And I think, you know, that's something that I've been guilty of doing. I need to get up, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And every day becomes the same thing. And it's just like, oh.
Groundhog.
Yeah, it can be.
But I think we've all pretty much agreed that there are all similarities in what we're doing. There has got to be a point, whether that boundary is switching your phone off at notifications at 7 o'clock, whether it is leaving the office at 5 o'clock, whatever those boundaries may be, you just have to set them and make sure you stick to them, because it might not be that you're going home to a family. It might be you're running a business and you're single and you go home to an empty home. Then you've got to find something yourself that can take you away from those trials and tribulations that you have, because I think, and we've come across a lot of business owners that, you know, have spent their whole life 7 till 10 or 11 o'clock in the day working
Can't think
consistently.
of anything worse.
Well, I don't see what you benefit.
And I don't understand, what is it that you're doing at 9 o'clock that you are able to focus on well enough to have done a good job of it? That's my thing.
Agreed.
I'm like, if I've done a 12-hour day, whatever I do in that 13th hour, it's going to need redoing. Like, you cannot... I don't personally believe that you can perform well enough for that long for it to be worth doing.
I just don't see the benefit of it. I don't see... We're not on this planet long enough to have time, you know.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? Time is a commodity you cannot buy.
No.
You can't buy time. And why would you spend a majority of it doing something that, yes, you may enjoy, but there are other things in life that are more important than business issues. And running a small business is a very difficult thing to do, and by no means it is easy. You know, unless you've stumbled on a revolutionary product that nobody else has got, you've got a patent on it and it's just going to fly without you doing anything.
Yeah.
You know, you need to focus on outside things. You know, at some point you've got to turn the door, lock it and say, I'm done. I'm now going to focus on this element.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I started a business to give me and my family a life. I didn't start a business for that to become my life.
Yeah.
And I think
Absolutely.
so many people can just get drawn into it, can't they? You know?
Runs away.
Yeah.
It was quite upsetting when we were sat with that particular customer, and he's literally said there, saying, "No, it's cost me everything.
Yeah.
This business has cost me everything. And yeah, great. I've got some nice cars and I've got plenty of money, and you know, I lost my family home. I lost my Christmas mornings waking up with my children and my families. And that's the biggest thing for me is that work-life balance has got to be in concrete. And you've got to be able to switch off.
Yeah. And I think, you know, having been quite burnt out and having to work my way out of that, you know, I remember, again, you know, when I look back and I think about it, I remember sort of after that and like 6 months down the line, because this is the other thing, I feel like there's just no quick fixes. Like sometimes it's boundaries, you just really got to hold the line knowing that you're doing the best thing for yourself. But yeah, out of that, about 6 months down the line, I just remember being in the house one morning, like kids are all getting ready for school. My kids walk themselves to school and we're also like the last port of call. Lots of kids come to our house, they all meet there and then they all go off to the different schools that they go to. And on a Friday's a hot chocolate Friday. So everyone comes to our house, we make them all hot chocolate, they all bring a mug, they get their hot chocolate and then off they all go. And I remember just like, literally, they all went out the door one Friday and I was just stood there thinking, yeah, this is it. This is the thing. Like, this is what I did it for. I wanted to be here. You know, when I was burnt out, I was like, no, I've got to leave the house. I've got to get up at 5:30. I've got to be in the car by 6. I'm going to be there by 7. I'm going to get all this stuff done. You know, 9 months down the line where I'm like, yeah, it's 8:10. My day's starting. Let's do this. You know, we've got all these kids off thinking that life is the best it can be because they're holding a hot chocolate. It's like, yeah, let's take some of that into today. Like, that's what I want.
But you've just given up something recently as well, right?
I have, yes.
So, and what was your reason for doing that? You know.
Okay, so I have been a school governor for 7 years, and I've been the chair of governors for 5 years. And in case anybody doesn't know, so governors, especially for maintained schools, they are strategic leaders of the school. So as the chair of governors, I literally was the leader of the school. The governing body will employ the head. So we're not the employer, but we would go through a recruitment process for a head teacher. And yeah, I've done that for 5 years. And I think it's actually a really interesting one, because in the end, there's a lot of it that's strategic and there's a lot of it that's difficult, and you have to have difficult conversations, and it's very much a leadership role. And I was happy with that, and it was stressful at times, and I didn't have a problem. Like, to your point about, was it stressful doing the coaching? I didn't have a problem with that stress. But actually what it came down to was I found myself in a situation where we needed support from the local authority. And not only was that support not forthcoming, but I felt like I was put in a situation where it was turned around on me as the chair of governors, that the implication was that there was something that I wasn't doing. And I was thinking, right, okay, I'm a volunteer and I don't feel supported, and this feels very stressful. And actually what I took it back to was work. I was thinking, well, wait a minute, at work, I feel supported. And if things are stressful, I know I work with people who've got my back. Why am I voluntarily putting myself in a situation that isn't like this? And I think, again, a lot of things came into that decision, but ultimately, because I'm in a good place, because I'm able to give myself that space to think about things, because my work-life balance is good, I was in a situation where I could be like, no, let's assess this. Let's not beat ourselves into the ground until it's dreadful. I don't want to do this anymore. So actually, I'm done. And I couldn't have done that if I wasn't looking after myself, I don't think.
I mean, talking about the burnout thing as well, I mean, I've experienced that where I actually ended up in hospital. So about a year into running Bluebell IT, I was working 70 hours a week. I was doing all the football coaching, loads of running. I was running crazy long distances at the time. So I was training hard, and I just never stopped. And one day I'd had a really busy day at work, got home, went for a run, came back, and I could feel my lips start swelling up and my throat start swelling up, and I looked in the mirror and I was sweating and I was feeling chilly and cold. I was itchy all over. I came up in hives all over my body as well. Laura, my wife, was out with the kids, and she just come home and she took one look at me sort of lying on the sofa like, well, what's going on here? And she called an ambulance. The ambulance came out and thought I was having an anaphylactic shock, which is what was happening. So they've, you eaten any nuts, you done this, you done that, you done this. No, must be something you've eaten. Got taken to hospital in an ambulance, put on antihistamines, through a drip, stayed in hospital for 2 or 3 days, and came out of hospital, was fine, everything had calmed down. Happened again about 2 or 3 weeks later, very similar situation. I was actually in the office here. I was sat around this table actually, and I started being sick. Lips started swelling up. Went home, went to the hospital again, IV, antihistamine. Went down, was in hospital for a day. And so I started having some tests with a consultant about what I may or may not be allergic to. And after talking through about my lifestyle with that consultant, he actually said, you're not allergic to anything. This is your body reacting to stress. And since that moment, I've really had to make some fundamental changes, having that downtime, going to bed early, all the things I mentioned earlier. And just, it came down to work-life balance. It really did, working long hours and then trying to fit in all the other stuff I wanted. I didn't have enough time to do that, but I was trying to do it. So I was up early, I was going to bed late, I wasn't sleeping properly, I had constant thoughts and stress going on in my head all the time. So now it's really about, self-care, looking after myself, making sure I go to bed on time, eating well, doing my exercise, having my time, enjoying and being present in moments with the kids, watching their football. All of that sort of stuff is really important, whereas before everything became a chore. Even running, which I was competing at a decent level with, even training was becoming a chore, but I was, again, that tick list, I've got to go out for my run today, I must do this. And it took the enjoyment out of everything and just created so much stress. And yeah, that's what sort of happened to me. And it's not happened since, luckily enough, but the consultant that I had picked up on it very quickly because he was an immunologist and they were testing for all these different things that I may be allergic to. But he said about 50% of the people that go through to see him to have these tests to find out what they're allergic to aren't actually allergic to anything. It is stress. It's your body reacting to stress.
Yeah.
Because you just keep going and going and going and going, and your body eventually goes, I've had enough of this, and just reacts. And that's what happened to me. So that was a big wake-up call for me, and a big wake-up call for Laura as well, because she was watching these episodes happen to me, and she's like, what is happening? And you think if I hadn't have had maybe those episodes, and you just keep going and going and going and going, that's where you could get into your mid-40s and have some serious health complications, people, but you couldn't you? Stress is a very big killer, or high blood pressure, or whatever it is, and I think you've really got to take a stand back and you've got to have that off time and do those things that you want to do, but make sure when you're doing them, you are enjoying them. I also wanted to touch on work-life balance for staff and the team as well.
Absolutely.
I don't know how you do that in your business. Make sure that people are having that downtime, maybe working from home. How do you sort of deal with that? And that leads into recruitment as well, I suppose, which I know we've talked about already, because people do want work-life balance, particularly after lockdowns and things like that, where everyone got to experience home working.
Or bought a dog.
Absolutely. Or bought a dog. Yes, that was a popular response.
Dog.
Not for us as a family, but generally. So I think for Move Digital, and we talked about this when we did recruitment, we have a lot of freelancers. And so I think for me, like, the key thing is really asking questions upfront about how they work. So I'm working with people who are already juggling multiple things, and I want to get a feel for how they do that and when they do their best work. So for example, we've got a project at the moment, and actually a lot of the people that we work with are US based. So I will be doing recordings online in the evenings, which I'm happy to make time for, but I was very deliberate about the fact that I made sure that the editor that we had, like, when is the best time for her to work? When is the best time for her to have these files? How can I plan this project to make sure that you've got what you need when you need it to do your best work? And actually it turns out she's very happy to do things evenings and weekends. That works really well for her. And what that's enabled us to do on that project is almost build in extra time, because we literally can do, we plan it around the fact that we can literally do a record at 5 p.m. I can get a transcript straight off the back of that. I can get it straight back to the team. They can send it to their team in America. By the time we wake up the next morning, we've got edits for her to work on. So although we don't have employees in the traditional sense, they're freelancers, it is really key to know exactly how they want to work, what flexibility they want, what work-life balance they want, because that enables us to do things differently to our benefit.
I think that's, for me, we've always had this big debate about working from home. Personally, I'm not a massive believer in it. And the reason why is I think there are a lot more negatives to working from home than being in an office than there are positives. And I'm not, and I don't mean that in a bad way. What I mean is that for an individual, there are some positives. So from a work-life balance, from the employee's perspective, there are huge benefits to them working from home. But from an employer's perspective, I think there are huge negatives. Now, you could argue that productivity is better when somebody is working from home. I don't think there's been enough time given to studies around whether somebody is more productive at home than they are. I would suggest that just logic would say that somebody is not as productive at home as they are in the office. And the argument for that would be that, let's say, for instance, you take somebody on new to a role, potentially, great employees, got a great background, and they're coming into your business that's got completely different products that they've sold before or you're selling. They learn when they're in the office around people that have been selling those products for a period of time. When you're locked away in a room at home, or you're in your living room or your kitchen table, it's more difficult to get hold of someone to talk about those things and have a conversation, because they will have other things that are going on around them if they are working from home or if that individual is working from an office. And the reason I say that is because my son, in his new role that he's just taken on, gets to work from home 3 days a week. And the amount of conversations I've had with him around, oh, well, I'm not sure how I do this, or I'm not quite sure how I get to that, or I'm not sure who I need to speak to. I said to him, well, get in your car, drive to the office that's in Milton Keynes, and spend 3 days in the office, because there will be people around you that you can go, excuse me, do you know where such and such is, or do you know where I can find that? Rather than going into a Teams group message, tapping away, and we've all been there. I'm in a group, several groups on Teams, a message pops in, then 20 other people reply. Before you know it, you're skim reading through all of the messages. You're trying to find the bit that you actually need to be interested in or involved in. So I think there's a lot more work to be done in terms of studies around whether somebody is more productive, or businesses are more productive working from home than they are working in an office.
I think what you're describing there is not location specific. I think what you're describing there is, if you want people to, for whatever reason, be it, some companies benefit because they don't have to have as many people, like they don't have to have as much physical space, or it's a benefit to their employees, or whatever it is. I think it isn't just a case of location. It's got to be backed up by your company culture and what it is. And if you have, younger junior employees, which most businesses do, well, how are you mentoring them? How are you giving them somebody that they can tap into wherever they are? Because it isn't, I think the companies that I see doing flexible working well are the ones that are absolutely concentrated on that. They're concentrated on how can we get everybody doing their best work no matter where they choose to be, rather than companies who are like, well, we can save some money on office so you're all going home 3 days a week.
Which I think a lot of larger businesses have taken that approach.
Yeah.
We're paying tens of thousands of pounds a month on rent for a building that holds 3,000 people, and we don't actually need it because everybody did a similar job whilst they were sat at home. Okay, but what have you lost off the back of that is my argument.
My favourite hilarious example is a friend of mine. He works for a really large company, and they've decided, that's it, we don't need this big office, but you have to be in 3 days a week. But we don't have enough desks for all of you. And they've basically invented this Glastonbury-style scrum every day at midday to get a desk. And if you don't get your 3 days in the office, that's a disciplinary. And it's the most ridiculous situation. But as far as I'm concerned, it's absolutely brilliant, because the stories are hilarious around what everybody's doing to try and do this. And all I can hear is him telling me about the hours and hours and hours that all of them are spending not working on projects, not winning work, not doing the things that they're being paid to do, but literally trying to get desk space. And I think things like that are a very clearly what you're describing. But I think overall, if you are focused on how can you get people to do their best work wherever they are, and as we said earlier, we've got all this technology, you've got all these things in your pocket. If they're working for you in a structured way for you and your employees, I think that can be really beneficial all round.
Yeah, I'm sort of in the middle really. I think a mixture of hybrid working, more geared towards being in the office, but having days every week where you might work from home, or a couple of days a week. I've seen it the other way, where people have gone full-time working from home that have been used to working in a big office environment for a big company, and all of a sudden they are crammed into a little desk in their bedroom because they've never had an office space, or they're sat around the kitchen table.
That's not good work-life balance.
And all that happens is their home life bleeds into their work life all the time. They literally come downstairs, make a cup of coffee, and they're at work. And then the kids come home from school at 3:00. They're shouting at the kids to be quiet because they've still got a couple of hours work left to do. Then they literally finish work, and then it's need to put, the dad hat on or the mum hat on. So I think that's too far the other way, and I've seen it, in family members that have roles have changed where they've closed offices that have actually suffered mental health problems because of they're not getting out the house anymore.
Yeah.
They're having to force themselves to go for a walk at lunchtime to get out of the house. I think here with the team that we've got behind us, they like having 1 or 2 days at home. One, it saves them a bit of fuel cost, where some of them have got a bit longer to travel. It does allow them to get their head down when they're working on certain projects without constant interruptions and things like that. And I personally find, for me, I'm very productive at home. But last week I was actually off work sick. I worked from home a couple of days. I actually had a couple of days off. But working from home, I felt very disconnected from the team as well. So there's so many swings and roundabouts, and I think a bit of a mixture of both is what works in our business here, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's what works for me. But first and foremost, I like that being my choice. Like for me, I want to go, if I've got a new project, I'm happy to have a chat with you about that online, video call, brilliant, but I'm going to come meet you in person if I absolutely can before we kick off, because there are certain things that I think you find out face to face. I could facilitate that if I physically couldn't ever see a person that I was working with, but if I don't have to, I prefer to be in a situation where I, like you say, a bit of hybrid, bit of both. But I very much like that it's my choice, and I think that's kind of what I want to bring when I'm working with other people, as much as possible. How can I facilitate it being your choice to do your best work? What can I do around that? I think this is such a massive topic. I think it's something, Ben, you were saying when we were discussing this before, like something we probably come back to, I think.
100%.
There's a couple of episodes of work here. Absolutely. Okay, cool. So final thoughts. What are your final thoughts, or one top tip, work-life balance?
Find your outside of work relief, whether that be family, gyms, hobbies, craft building, knitting, whatever it may be. You've got to find something, dancing, whatever it may be. You've got to find something outside of your work environment, and also get to the point where you work to a particular time, and once that's done, you shut the door and you leave and let the business, your business is not going to fold overnight. That's my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I would say self-care in terms of making sure you have the downtime, and for me personally, prioritising sleep, what I eat, and getting exercise is a big part of that. If I'm doing those things and doing them right, I'm generally more productive at work as well. So that would be my takeaway. Yeah.
And I think for me it comes, I know I mentioned this earlier, but I think it comes down to just focusing on it is a really personal thing. Like, you need to do what works for you. It needs to look like how it looks like for you. So don't worry too much if you are trying and you're not quite getting it right because you're following somebody else's, template. Take the things that work for you and just, keep trying things out until you get it. But
Good.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us again. And remember to like and subscribe so you know about our next episode.